Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. How's everybody doing today?
Not too bad. How about you, Mike?
I'm doing well. Just kicking it up with the coffee. But for whatever reason, I woke up early today. I was up at like 5 a.m. just couldn't sleep. Too excited to talk about external tools. So I'm already happy and ready to go, and I got my coffee now, so we're good.
Nice. My daughter had her first snow day. She was devastated.
That's right. You guys had a ton of snow coming through there.
I
was
think we
looking
had 9 inches.
I was getting notifications on my phone said snow's coming, and I'm like, I don't see any snow coming. What are they talking about? So it must have all gone south of us.
Yeah, it's not often that we get missed when Chicago gets massively hit.
Yeah, it was a big storm that came through.
We got it. Yeah.
But you're safe, warm, cozy in the home.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
especially another reason to be warm was my Dell G3. All of a sudden, randomly, I tried to sign in. It did an update.
Oh, I was having issues this week too. Everything's been crashing for me.
Oh, the weirdest thing, it created a local user on my computer, and then mine, I would click the sign in button, and it would look like it was going to go to the password and then go back.
Weird.
And I kept
Something's
trying.
weird's going on. They've been updating something that screwed stuff up, I think.
So I literally just went, screw it, and I just restarted with the computer, like reset it.
Oh wow, you just said
because I couldn't get in.
Wow,
Couldn't get in. But
Hey Tommy, have you received any calls recently where somebody wants to share on your computer?
Has the Prince of Africa said they want to? You've just won $2.5 million, and
did you let them take control?
I'm still way but I did actually get on Microsoft support about not being able to sign into Edge, and I think that might have done it because we did something with Intune. Anyways, point being, restart the computer.
Yikes!
But you need an internet connection. It was all the stuff. How to go okay.
Yeah.
If you click Shift F12 18 times.
Welcome to burning your morning.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
So, but do you know how long nowadays it takes you to get your computer back to
nothing anymore.
I'm not concerned about deleting everything because nothing's on the computer.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy?
Same. I have every so a pattern that I use in my company, and I instruct my people to do the same, is if you have anything on your computer, I take all my files, I work on them on my desktop screen. I work on the file there if I need to have a file. If I start a new PBIX file or whatever, I start it there, do my work, and then when I'm done, at the end of the day, I require myself to clean off the home screen of my computer. My home screen computer there's no icons on it. There's no files. Every day, I clean them all off and put them away in folders inside OneDrive or SharePoint sites that I work off of. And that way I know everything's backed up. It's all saved in the cloud somewhere. So if tomorrow my computer dies, there's only one or two applications that I'm actually nervous about. Actually, my son and I have been playing Minecraft I've been on the PC, he's been on the Xbox. So I've been playing Minecraft with him, and he's like, we found a world that was super fun and had a whole bunch of treasures in it. And he was like, Dad, this is the best world ever. I'm like, okay, I got to find that world and save it just to make sure we don't lose it. Yeah. So I saved all of my Minecraft worlds because those are hard to come by. But other than that, I can literally blow away my machine. All my code is in GitHub. All my other stuff is in SharePoint. Doesn't matter. You
just sign
start over from scratch.
Your extensions are done. I'll do you one about OneDrive for Business. You can move the location of desktop. So my desktop's actually a folder in OneDrive.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I turn all that stuff off. I don't even worry about that.
Syncing your local to the SharePoint folders.
So, yes.
Oh my gosh.
That's all I do.
Yeah.
Because that way I don't have to move all the files in there.
Exactly.
Right? So automatically it's just saved to that location.
100%.
Even if you do crash and you're working locally, it's tied into that synced folder.
Maybe you lose a day of work, but not a big deal.
Right. And with everything,
come a long way.
Yes, it has.
With everything you can sign into, Outlook remembers your settings. VS Code will download all the extent. You're good to go.
Yep.
And the only pain was Power BI because you're all the preview features.
Only the thing we talk about all the time.
Yeah, the only thing we talk about is all right, I got to start over. All my connections and all that history was gone. And then one of the things I use all the time, segue, the external tool.
Segue. So this is a great lead-in, Tommy. It's super great lead-in, and this is why keep going. I know where you're going with this one.
But honestly, external tools, I literally sign in, do my settings the way I want to in Power BI. But the next thing I have to do is external tools because I use them so often.
All the time.
Yeah. So, but obviously, this would have been a pain in the butt.
Wait. Hold on. where do you get all your external tools from? That's the important thing. Where do you go to get all the tools? Because I just released last night a big update to a tool that we produce that help you find all these things. Where'd you get your stuff from, Tommy? Do you go download them?
Sponsoring, so BusinessOps, Power BI tips.
Yeah.
Basically, oh man, it's huge.
It's huge. Like, it's a big file. It's a big file, but it has everything. Like everything. There's a couple. We're still working on adding some more tools. We have discovered some new ones that we kind of just stumble across because we scour the community for these kinds of things. So we're adding a couple more tools here and there. There's some more tools that we want to integrate. But man, I had to give mad kudos. So a gentleman from the community, James Bartlett, is incredible. Dude is super sharp. Works for Des Moines, Iowa University, and he's just like, I love Power BI. I learned code stuff, and this is fun. How can I help? And I was like, dude, I need help with the external tool stuff because there's so much of it going on. I need a hand. And he was like, yeah, I'm happy to help out. He's jumped in. He's helped me update stuff. We've been making things more efficient. We're making improvements. Like, it's great to have another mind to bounce the code things off. So James is crushing it. I just gotta say it. This thing would not be as good as it was without the help of James, because he's really stepped up and done like, a ton of extra work. And for those of you who don't follow him, he's an up and coming star, I think, in the Power BI community. He's really pushing for things, and I want to really
pressure on, man.
Yeah, no pressure, James. No pressure. But I'll throw his link here. Go follow him on LinkedIn. He's a great guy. He has a lot of good tips and tricks, and he's just in the weeds with Power BI. And he's like us. He's cut from the same fabric. Birds of a feather flock together, I guess is what they call it.
He's with us today. So, Chad, if you want to thank him,
thank him. He's in the chat window as we speak.
Tell him if you got any bugs.
The next versions of greatness.
Go find the Git repo and tell us we have bugs.
I do want to give it one quick other shout out to another island I've never met before, but my scanner API.
Oh yeah,
people are having trouble with
I saw an update this week
with the flow, because if you're kind of outside the region, or if you have like 1,000 workspaces, which I'm surprised more people than I thought do in their tenant.
Yeah.
I was getting a lot of issues. They're like, yeah, I can't, it doesn't work for me. I'm like, well, how many data sets? They're like, well, I have 100 workspaces. I'm like, holy crap.
Wow.
So, but another Iowan, Zach Johnson, who I told him to reach out to James, help fix the flow. So that's great. But going real back to BusinessOps, I'm surprised there's no other competition for that, because do you know how hard it is to even find new external tools that come out?
Telling you.
I said a Google alert, that gave me a bug.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yep. I'm telling you, dude. So couple things that we do with BusinessOps, right? We go find the external tools. We reach out to the authors of those tools and ask them, hey, do you want to be part of this library of tools that we're producing? We have made, and so this is the hard part, right? We've made a method, a strategy, we've had some IP around how do we work with those people to connect to them and get their latest versions of their tools and kind of bundle it all into one package. So we've got all the tools. It's ALM Toolkit, DAX Studio, Tabular Editor 2, Tabular Editor 3, and a whole bunch of other just really helpful tools across the internet that are, some of them are like really robust. There's Analyze in Excel that's in there from SQL BI. We've got a couple other ones that are just kind of around. So some people have made some PowerShell scripts that are super helpful. Steve Campbell, another guy who contributes, he's another MVP who contributes on Power BI Tips, has split PBIX files. So if you have a model and report combined as one thing, he wrote a tool that allows you to take a copy of that file. He deletes out the data connection on one of them, so it's a thin report, and he deletes out all the pages on the other file and makes a thin the model portion of the file. So he has been able to craft his way around, again, granted unsupported, so use at your own risk. But he's able, so you can now with a one button click make a model and thin report from any report. And I've seen a ton of YouTube videos of do these 50 steps to make a thin report. No, it's one button. Click this button. It's done.
It's hilarious that some of these things are unsupported, because without them, my solution wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Hot swap connections.
How do I back up and restore a model from one workspace to another with a thin report?
Can't do it.
I don't.
You can't.
I have to take the thin report, peel out the connection to the old model, and point it at the new one.
Exactly.
That's Steve's tool.
That's Steve's tool.
You can make a freaking data flow from your desktop file.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's so cool what they can do now. So anyways, for anyone who's listening, please, in the chat window, if you have found a tool that you have not observed inside BusinessOps, we're looking for more of them. And BusinessOps is more than just external tools now. So BusinessOps also does your theme generation. So if you use BusinessOps, you can actually add BusinessOps as an external tool into your desktop file, and it's a one-button press to get to themes. So we have the theme generator automatically built and inside BusinessOps. Additionally, we also have DAX.guide as your helper for any DAX formulas. So BusinessOps is your one-button click to get to DAX.guide. And then the other one we just recently added was DAX.do. So if you want to test code or test some DAX statements, you can now use DAX.do directly in BusinessOps. So BusinessOps is more than just a bunch of external tools. It's becoming like the singular place that you're going to be able to use to get all of your kind of documentation, information, stuff around Power BI. It's going to be a single downloader that you can just get into, leave it open on a different screen, just work in it, and it's going to continually add more help and content for you building better and faster reports on essentially, inside Power BI. So we're really excited about it. At least I am.
So this is the best mechanism to add external tools.
Correct.
Bar none.
I'm surprised you don't have any competition.
You don't have to find
for a gallery.
Tommy, why are you surprised? Because I spent weeks of my own personal time to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Like, it was not easy. I had to build building an entire desktop application from scratch. Like, I'd never built a desktop application before, so I had to figure this crap out. So, yeah, sorry, Seth. I had to tamp down Tommy here. Why there's.
I didn't say I'm glad.
Says the one who's never built a desktop application. Oh, it's so easy.
Who said it was easy? I just said I'm surprised someone else hasn't had the idea.
Tommy, we don't need competition.
Here comes the conflict portion of the podcast episode.
Yeah,
right before we even talk about the actual topic of
the day.
Podcast,
all right, now they're done the intro.
Not the container.
Yeah.
What are external tools? So for the audience,
that's a good idea.
Like, hey, we're Power BI folks. Depending on what version you're on, if you're on an older version, you may not even know what we're talking about. But as of 6-8 months, maybe a year, right? There's been a new part of the Power BI desktop called external tools. And if in the past you didn't have something like BusinessOps, you would have to go out into the ether and try to find out who made a Power BI external tool. And the Italians were front and center with DAX Studio. There was a release right out of Microsoft announcing ALM Toolkit and I think Tabular Editor. Like, that was part of the blog. Those were the three things. And then Mike, that's when you started investing a bunch into consolidating and finding, but then it exploded. There were a bunch of new tools.
Totally.
We had tools that we wanted to throw in there.
Yep.
And essentially these are all open source or third-party tools that have been created to make building Power BI reports or managing or deploying or whatever the case may be, kind of add-ons, right? Like, if you think about Excel add-ons, all of the new features and things that they allow you to do within the program are now bringing those capabilities into Power BI for all of us to use.
100%.
And that's what we're talking about today. Probably in particular, several of our favorites or ones that are amazing are external tools, because I couldn't see myself living without them. Right. 100%. And maybe they have a little bit more direct support, but I think we're going to get into why some of them are extremely important.
And it's amazing that they did release it. I never thought there'd be anything like it, but it makes a lot of sense because of the way. If you look at kind of like the tech background of a Power BI model, you've always had ability to connect to it. It was always the copy of the port, like it connects actually in a sense a server and a local host on your computer every time you open Power BI desktop, which allows you to do a lot of things. We've always had the tricks with Marco Russo's had Excel tools in the past, obviously DAX Studio.
Yep.
But it was always like you had to manually connect to the Power BI report. It's always been in Power BI, the ability to, in a sense, connect to it outside of the tool.
Correct.
But what external tools again allows is use that capability and do some really, again, to Seth's point, really configure the model, either enhance, view the metadata, or actually edit the model outside of Power BI.
Mhm.
So I actually, with ALM Toolkit, I remember it must have been 3 years ago or 4 years ago, North Carolina, for the Power Platform Summit. It was before even ALM Toolkit was out, but it was in the GitHub repo. And a guy, someone I met there, was like, "There's an application in this repo." So he basically tried to build it, because we basically looked at the code and saw what it was going to do. Like, oh my gosh, like this change management idea was crazy. And this was before there was actually any application. So that ability with ALM Toolkit, for those who don't know,
Mhm.
it's basically ability. It's just tracking a source and target, almost like a GitHub repo. When you're doing a commit,
Yep.
say what's changed in the model.
Yeah, and it's
That's
a
amazing.
code based tool. So for those of you who don't know, like the inner workings of Power BI, this is where every single thing you touch, every setting you turn on, incremental refresh, adding a measure, all of those individual objects of the Power BI file turn into some sort of JSON level asset
Mhm.
inside the object of the data model. So every time you're touching something, you're writing a little bit more code. And so all this tool does is basically breaks apart everything into its components. So if you have parameters, it shows you the parameter from Power Query. If you have a table being loaded, it shows you the parameters of said table. If you have a measure, all the things that go along with the measure, its formatting, the formula itself, other details. There's a thing called a lineage tag, so Microsoft can track different assets and as they change inside the data model. There's a whole bunch of really interesting things that have been happening here. One thing I'll note here, and this is a total random rabbit trail. Have you guys noticed if you rename tables or rename measures, like certain parts of Power BI, the data model, stuff just automatically rebuilds itself now. Previously, if you would rename things, stuff would break, right? If you would rename like a table in like Power Query, it would break anything that was touching that table. All your relationships would break, the visuals would break, everything would fall apart. I think they've added the lineage tag to help track assets regardless of their name. So now if I change a Power Query table name from, Michael's amazing data table to Seth's amazing data table, when you hit load and apply, the name of the table changes, but since the lineage tag did not change, I don't get a whole bunch of breaks across the model. It's been a way better
That's
experience for
crazy.
me.
That's crazy because so it does that with columns as well.
Everything has a lineage. If you look at the ALM
No,
Toolkit,
I didn't notice it because you get so hyper,
Yeah.
focused on like, oh,
Everything
crap, I'm
else.
changing this column in the view,
Yes.
everything's going to blow
Blow up.
downstream.
So lineage tags, I
Wow.
think Microsoft recognized the fact.
Where did I miss that?
Well, think about it, right? Well, this makes a lot of sense when you're doing things like composite models. The lineage tag is essential for having models of models because you can't use a name of a column anymore because that causes all kinds of problems.
Because that's when they realized the issue.
That's when I think they realized the issue. And so with that, after that, when composite models were coming out, someone was like, oh, wait a minute. We need to step back and say, that's not helpful. We need to have lineage tags on everything because now everything links via lineage tags.
This object still exists.
Yes.
They just changed the name. We probably shouldn't nuke everything.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Well, I had crashes.
So did I.
If I connected
Your
to a
whole
model
model, yeah.
and made a measure in the thin report that matched the same name as a measure in the main report,
what I'm shocked at,
it blew up.
That's a single blog in and of itself, man. Like we just made your lives 10 times
All right,
easier.
we're gonna do rock paper scissors for who has to write that blog.
Oh,
1, 2, 3, shoot.
shoot.
But I discovered this yesterday and I thought, you know what? I think that's what, again, I don't have any confirmation on this. This is totally Michael's speculation, but if I'm thinking through like the changes I've been seeing in desktop, I've noticed things not breaking as often for like renaming of things, and I think it has something to do with lineage tags. So I gotta go talk to some inner people. Maybe I'll go hit up Phil Seamark and be like, dude, what's with lineage tags? Can you give me some insight here? Because I'd like to be able to get some like confirmation, like, yeah, this is okay. So for any of the Microsofties who are up very early and can't sleep in Seattle land, because I know this is very early for you, go ahead, give me some confirmation in the chat that this is a thing. Or is Alex Powers? Can you give me a link for this one? Is there a link, Alex? We can throw down here for this. So, anyways,
that would be crazy. Cool.
We'll see if that actually
some yes and some still broken for me in the chat. So we'll see.
Check what version of desktop you're on.
I will. I will say, so like of the external tools we use the most, right? It
Mhm.
sounds like ALM Toolkit, and if you're SQL folks, it's very similar to like SQL Compare,
Yeah.
where you're comparing database and the objects within them. Immensely helpful. I think a lot of these tools that we're even talking about you can't have a big premium environment without using them. Because
that's
we
really
make
cool.
changes to our large models with these
Yep.
tools
Yep.
that without them
Could not do.
you're kind of hamstrung. You're bound by weekends or when you're refreshing the model or pushing out republishing the whole thing. And ALM Toolkit is one that I've used right out of the gate. And for people who aren't familiar with external tools or are nervous about using them, right, there are some core ones that you should be fine with. One is Power BI tips, anything, right? Theme stuff we build for you, that's in there.
Yep.
But
correct.
with ALM Toolkit, that's Christian Wade. Like, he's one of the guys, if not one of the best,
Right.
like one of the guys at Microsoft who
Yeah.
knows tabular models, built this thing a long time
Correct.
ago, and has just been iterating it and making it better and better. And now it works with Power BI.
And so yeah, it's
awesome tool to understand
yes.
the comparison between even versions, right? Like,
Yes.
you have a old version of a Power BI file, and then you started mucking around with it because you had a bunch of changes in your new local, and you can compare the two. Oh, what did I break? What was that old thing that I now just overwrote my DAX measure that took me a half a day to figure out, So a lot of value in seeing kind of the history or, those two comparisons of start and finish, and then pushing your changes into the new one.
Yes.
And for those who are wondering too, an external tool doesn't necessarily have to be an application. And I think this is the other side of this for a lot of people who just want to get started. It can actually be just connecting to an Excel file,
Yeah.
or one
Or
of the
a
tools,
link, right?
or a link, or basically like it'll export your metadata or the actual tables in it. I've actually used that a lot, where it'll actually just export all the tables.
Mhm.
Yep.
But when you actually look at the workings of an external tool, Ike Friedman has one of the coolest tools that's just really an Excel or Power BI report file that will basically show you
IMKE is how you say it.
IMKE.
I'm trying
My
to
bad.
say her name. It's a different way I had to say her name. I do the same thing.
IMKE.
It's Fieldmann, I think is the name.
Yeah.
And she has her own.
Well,
It's an Excel file that connects
Right.
into a Power BI file. It's technically
Right.
not an external tool
well,
because you have
I
to go
created
download
it.
the Excel file and then
Yeah.
use it that way. You said you created it?
Well, because you just change you just look at an external tool file, just change the direction of it where it points, and I could open up Power BI desktop or the Excel file.
Did you just say you have an external tool?
Well, no, I created a file
Tommy,
that connects to someone else.
send that to me because I'm going to add
Why
that to.
isn't that an
But
external
I
tool?
didn't do the Excel file. But
No,
it's
send me your
Okay.
PBI tools file because that's
Okay.
I've been trying to add that one. I haven't found a good way of adding it. So
Yeah. Okay.
that's
I'll
one
do
I
that.
want to add. That's on my
Yeah.
list.
Anyways, for those listen, it's an external tool that basically just points to an Excel file that will basically open up the machine and tell you what columns you should keep. But it's not an application. So there are so many tools like that help in your workflow. I think it raises the question, because we could go on to each one. It's not that type of podcast, but why are they so important? I think we're talking about some of the reasons right now, but I guess, like, are they essential? Obviously for us, but for anyone who claims to be a Power BI pro, should they say like you have to use them?
Oh yeah. If in interviews, if you tell me I know Power BI, I'm expert at Power BI, I will ask you what external tools do you use, and you better say ALM Toolkit, you better say DAX Studio, and you better say Tabular Editor at least 2, hopefully Tabular Editor 3. If you're telling me you're a pro, and if you just say you use Power BI, I'm just a couple years in, I may not expect that of you. But if you tell me you're managing stuff, that also indicates to me how big a model you're actually working with. Because if you're not working with big models, you're probably not using these tools. So if you're working on small models, you're probably not doing this stuff.
Yeah, this is one of those role things, right? Like, if the Power BI role is in a business unit, or you're not working with large models, I think it's okay not to have some of them. But like,
Sure.
why aren't you using DAX Studio? right? Like for just seeing your model sizes, for doing all the things that it can do as far as code and validation and things like that. I would have almost at one point in time left Tabular Editor out of it, because it's like it's light years in terms of like what you can do from the code base. But now I would probably agree with Mike in that there are even some things that my team is doing as far as like making schema changes on tables and deploying those live without having to refresh the partitions through this stuff. I like, they're taking it to another level as far as what these tools can do. So yeah, I would 100% agree. Like those three, bar none. If you're playing with big premium and you're saying that you're an individual that can step into that space,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not familiar with all of those components, then you're not playing in them the right way, right?
Yep.
So, but let's say you're in a non-premium, because I wouldn't want to penalize someone for their organization not have premium. If you're still, let's say you say you're a Power BI pro, like you can create reports, you say you're one of the best that are hired me. Do you still need to know external tools?
Yes.
Or use it? Okay.
Yes. If you say you're the
Yeah.
best, you better know these things.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. So because
Yeah.
if someone says no, that means they've probably never used Vertipac Analyzer or looked at their data model.
You again,
Yeah.
you haven't
you
dealt
know,
with big models if you haven't had to go tune and rip out columns because your model's hitting thresholds on pro licenses. Like that's a model that's like over a gig in size on a pro license. I hope you have bigger models than that.
So I think the interesting thing here is, external tools, as we probably haven't articulated a ton, right? Like there's a ton of different tools out there. Some are more useful than others, right?
Agreed.
Some like different versions of like what are you doing in your report, all the different objects, measures, etc. Like the theme generator, going to a link to help you build the theme, stuff like that. But like those three are on the opposite spectrum. Like they're the enterprise tools for
Yeah.
Power BI, right? It'd be
Yeah.
like back in the day, you not knowing how to use Visual Studio and say like you build a tabular model, right? Like, well, these are the, actually that's a horrible analogy. But like the fact is that like these are the things you would find in Visual Studio.
Yes.
These are the enterprise tools that you would need to know if you're developing and working on large models within that Power BI premium ecosystem.
Yep.
So I agree with you. So we talked about ALM Toolkit, DAX Studio. How often are you guys using that versus Tabular Editor?
Well, it's interesting now. I use DAX Studio for really one purpose, and that's query timing.
Yep.
Basically looking at like how long a query's taking, kind of breaking it down. But everything else I do in Tabular Editor.
Yeah, and there's the Vertipac Analyzer, which has now been integrated in many different tools. Vertipac Analyzer is its own tool, is a tool in Tabular Editor 3 and I think not 2, but just 3, and then also in DAX Studio. So I use the Vertipac Analyzer to look at what columns I have.
Oh, huge.
How big is each of the columns? Am I using all the columns? Where is most of my data the data storage coming from? Because I'm trying to tune the model to make sure that I'm not overwriting too much data into a single table, right? I don't want to, if I'm having GUIDs as keys inside a data model somewhere, that's going to eat up a lot of memory somewhere. Is there any way I can design around that so it's not so memory intensive? I mean, that's what I'm looking to tune. So that's a tool. But Tom, you're right. I don't think there's any other tool that I found that does better. If you write a DAX query and then execute it, DAX Studio is the place to go for that one. It's super fast to use it. And what I'll do a lot of the times is I use DAX Studio to write custom data queries to go back to a data model when I'm doing embedded things. So if I need a singular table out of my data model and I don't want to render it in Power BI Desktop or Power BI Visual, I want an application to go touch that query. What I'll do is I'll make the table that I need inside Power BI. I'll go to the Performance Analyzer, turn it on, record the data that was created when that table's made, take the auto-generated query, because it's beautifully written. The queries that are auto-generated for tables are very well done. There's variables that are made. Each filter inside a calculate statement or some kind of table summarize, whatever that is made as a single variable. So it's very easy to read. And then all of that can then be just sent right into DAX Studio. You drop the whole thing in, evaluate this statement against the model, and boom, you can return a full table there.
Well, yeah, and the fact that you can see what each iteration of your query is doing. We talked about
Yep.
this last episode where it's
Yep.
creating a DAX, function. It's creating a DAX measure
Yep.
out of your measure.
Yep.
But it actually breaks down the timing, like how many rows did this evaluate and how long did this take.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that goes back to where you don't necessarily have to be a premium, admin of your company to use external tools. If you are developing, DAX function or like pretty intense intelligence in terms of advanced DAX, you better have had a reason to use this
Yeah.
to optimize your own performance.
Someone's chatting about this one, Tommy, in the chat window. Does Tabular Editor 3 have IntelliSense for DAX? I think it does.
Oh yeah, I think it's better.
Yeah, it's the IntelliSense.
It's better than the desktop.
Yeah, IntelliSense on Tabular Editor 3 is the best IntelliSense I've ever seen for DAX.
Oh my gosh.
And you can even, like, what you could do in a full developer tool is if you call out a measure in the middle of a calculate statement, you can right-click that measure and say, show definition, and it will actually show you the definition of where that measure came from, and you can go in and look at nested queries, and in line, as you're editing things, it lets you see those queries. It's incredible. And now there's the DAX debugger, which I haven't played with as much, but I've gotten a couple people who've been playing with it a little bit now. The DAX debugger is like next level. Like this is crazy ahead of, like, I don't build anything in desktop anymore.
Yeah.
First thing I do, I'll open a desktop file, I hop right into Tabular Editor, I open that sucker up because it's multiple windows. I can pop things out. I can rearrange my landscape however I need to. If I need to drag an extra window outside of Tabular Editor and hang it out on the corner of my screen, I can totally do that. It is the way to go. It's absolutely incredible.
I completely agree. So the DAX debugger, just for those who haven't seen the update on that, for all those times that you're trying to use DAX Studio or your visuals to try to see what the filter context is, and you're trying to hack your way to that, DAX debugger basically will tell you per line where the evaluation context is, and you can actually add your own in. Granted, I know it's not universal, so it's a little limited and depending on what your queries or your DAX function's doing. So if you have a very intense measure, the debugger won't work as of now, but it's getting there. But no, I agree. Like Tabular Editor 3, and this could be just a podcast about that. Like, I can't remember the last time. The only time I create a measure in Power BI Desktop is for a live connection, because
it's
Tabular Editor doesn't connect to the live connections.
That is the one downside of most of these tools that I see here is there's this whole thin report area where not a lot of the tools are supporting the ability to go into a thin report and see what's built inside the thin report. I think IMKE's tool is doing that. I think you should actually point her tool at a thin report and it'll actually rip out the measures that are in there. But that's one of the challenges that I find with some documentation that I build for reports is you have this report, and then how do I get all the details out of it? So some of these tools will help you easily get out the definitions of the model, all those kind of great things. The thing you can't get out of those thin reports is the measures that are created inside the thin report. So there's, I think stuff's coming. One of the tools we haven't talked about yet is it called PBI tools from Matthias?
Oh yeah, it's still pretty early beta.
It's still pretty early, but that's another one that it has a lot of promise. And so the way. All right, this is going to get super deep here really quick here. I've been talking with him. I'm trying to figure out a way. We got to sync up a bit more because the goal is to add his tool into BusinessOps as well, figure out how we can find a connection point there additionally. But, oh, yeah, there it is. Thank you, James. Action BI Toolkit is the name of the tool. Holy smokes. This one is an ability for you to then decompress the PBIX file, not for the model, but for the visuals inside it. So we've always had issues around, I made a change to the model or the report. I don't know what changed. You just kind of like take it on free will. Like, here's what happened. We move forward, we change it and move on. BI Action Toolkit or Action BI Toolkit takes the Power BI file, all the visuals and stuff like that, and decompresses them into small little JSON files that you can go check into code, and you can rip apart a Power BI file, recompile a Power BI file, all via code. Incredible. So I'm really excited about that one. I'm looking forward to, I've played with it a couple times. I think it's got some real strong potential. Again, I'll note here, totally unsupported. So if you rip apart files with and without this one, it's not supported by Microsoft. They have not published a standard around the visual part of a Power BI file and how you can take it apart and put it back together. But what is in that tool is next level stuff. When that one turns into an actual UI that you can leverage and do that with files, it's going to be amazing. So it's really cool.
That one's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, it does.
Well, and a lot of these tools too, like I can't wait to see the UI or what that's going to do. I think it's right now just DevOps. I don't know if it's GitHub for in terms of what it's supporting
Yes.
based on some of the documentation I looked at, because that is an interesting route people are going. For those who don't know, since it's not a Power Apps podcast, but I think it does note at this time because we're seeing more of this transition in the Power Platform. What you can do in a Power App now is actually connected to a GitHub repo. So I've actually been using this and what that basically does is you make a change in the Power App, it'll save to a GitHub repo, and then using VS Code, I can actually make a change in the code, like what the extraction, and commit that to GitHub, and that will update the Power App. So if I need to change like a data source, if I need to actually change what something says, but it's that ability in terms of that, in a sense, the Git history or the being able to commit, see that different history and actually see everything behind the scenes. And Power Apps is the team has been doing a huge parts with that, like extracting a Power App file and basically really treating it in a sense as that no code pro code kind of thing. And I think we're seeing that more with Power BI.
Yes.
Well, now with Power Apps, I can actually change the layout. So if I actually want to change a label to be from all the way to the left, all the way to the right, I can do that in the code. I don't even have to open my browser. And I think maybe Power BI is getting there too. We've talked about this in bulk, where everything we're talking about right now is really model based,
Yes.
not necessarily
Correct.
report based. Except
Yes.
I think the report analyzer by Michael Kovalsky.
Again, we're going to butcher all these names.
Yeah,
We're
we
so
butchered
sorry.
names.
We're just going to
Yeah,
use first
so-
names on everything. Michael, thank you for your tool. We know who you
Michael
are.
K.
I will try to capture all these links and put them out there as well. But he's from the Microsoft team working on stuff, and he's building separate tools that are helping you at the report level, visualizing the visuals on the page, where they sit, if there's anything alignment issues. He's interrogating the PBIX file and producing output tools that you can kind of get into it a little bit more.
One strikes me, Mike, that isn't part of BusinessOps yet.
It is.
And no, is a tool I'm thinking about that maybe this company should reach out to you to get their tool into that. It's a small company. They own SQL Server Management Studio. Because technically, right, like when you're working with large models, SSMS is part of this process, right? Like logins where you can refresh your partitions, take a look at what's going on, look at the Power Query, modify the Power Query in there. It's another avenue to the tabular models on the back end.
That's true. I've been kind of letting Microsoft
Management Studio Shell should probably be an external tool in the repertoire there.
So this is, I don't know if this is an external tool, but this is another tool that I use alongside Power BI. I use the SQL Server Profiler, so SQL Profiler as well, and I use that a lot when I'm trying to understand what my incremental refreshes are doing, and not all the time, but I do it maybe the first couple times I refresh a model to make sure that it's building things correctly and I can see it doing its thing. That's part of my February presentation that apparently I'm doing around incremental refresh now. So I'll have to. I'm putting that one together. There's a lot of demo pieces for that one, so I just got to make sure I have a good a robust demo of data coming in with partitions and such in there. But that's another really good tool that I really like and use that fairly frequently. Oh, anyways.
It is interesting though too. There's probably a way to do that without Microsoft's direct support. For those who are listening who actually do have some dev experience, I'm realizing the more you get into Power BI, the more you can't escape having to understand PowerShell a bit. A lot of these tools actually utilize PowerShell to make that connection. So if you hated PowerShell, you're unfortunately going to have to probably look at it to make sure some things work. But I would say the tools that are not necessarily a direct application or point to an application, like an EXE, are utilizing PowerShell to connect to the server of the database and opening up Excel or opening up whatever file it is. So if you wanted to create your own external tool, maybe you have something that you do your own workflow. There's probably a direct way to actually create an external tool yourself. And it's not terribly the tool, not the app, guys. So before we go on fire again, to create an external tool or at least create a connection to it is not necessarily a tedious effort. If you have some basic PowerShell knowledge and you have something you're doing like an Excel file you want to open to connect to that model.
Yep. What I will say, if you are a budding developer and you want to build things, I would recommend not trying to use PowerShell. There are other tools that are out there. So PowerShell is probably the easiest, maybe the most kind of like, you're trying to automate things on a desktop machine, you can do a good amount of things there. However, what I would say is there's some other tools, like you could actually do this with Python, and then you can bundle a Python file into an exe file, which is actually my preferred method. So most of my methods for building external tools are around creating like an exe file that you would execute from desktop and then pass in connection strings into there. So that's kind of my preferred method. So yes, there are a number of tools that are out there in PowerShell. When I've worked with those developers, everyone's like, yeah, my solution is not the best, but I was able to hack it together and make it work. So I feel like a lot of the PowerShell solutions are like, yeah, it works. But a lot of those individuals are like talking about like, how would I make it more robust? And they're talking about learning or building something else, like a little tiny thin application around how to make their own external tool. I will say this too, if anyone is in the community listening or on, coder people there that are on the audience, please reach out, because I'm looking to start a project here where we enable more people to build external tools. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to build like an accelerator, right? Instead of using PowerShell, here's another, give some simple examples around how would we do this with be able to build a simple exe file with good documentation on GitHub. I'd like to build a repo that could let you do essentially the same things that PowerShell is doing, but without having to have the PowerShell as a part of your solution.
External tool.
Well, it's more like documentation on how to do it, right? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
some best practices, because I've been playing around with as soon as external tools came out, I've been playing around with them. Like I was there from the very beginning, and I thought this is a great idea. And I think one of the things I think Microsoft has missed here, and a couple features for desktop, is Microsoft builds the infrastructure. They build the components, and they build the definition of how things work. That's what they do really well at. They think through all the design criteria, they take everyone's input and can build something that everyone can use. What they're not doing, and what I wish they would do more of, would be open up more of their tool to third parties, applications, external, like they're getting there with a couple of these things. A big miss was on the quick measures. Quick measures was one of those things that you could have totally opened up. Themes was the first thing they opened up by allowing you to import your own themes. But we don't have a folder in Power BI Desktop where you can stash all of your old themes and just pick from a list. So in the same way they do the same thing with external tools, they have a folder that you can securely add external tools into, and it then calls them. I want the same thing for themes. Give me a folder where here's a general folder in the users of my computer. These are all the theme files that I'm going to use. Let me just dump them there. Just go pick them up every time desktop loads, so that way when I hit the theme button, I have all of my custom themes already pre-built and stored inside desktop.
Well, if you can have organizational visuals, you should be able to have organizational.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so these are like really, so, Microsoft, if you're listening, all one of you, please open up your tool more, give us more capability to build tools that complement and supplement your tool. I think the excitement around external tools and how much stuff people built very quickly, like people were building tools were like, I'm going to connect Tableau to a Power BI local data model. And so what? We're now using Power BI to model data for other visualization tools. How cool is this? Like, I mean, that's a good blog article right there. Use Tableau to connect to Power BI, build visuals. Like, how cool is that? Because Tableau can't model data very well. So like, this is amazing. So like, there's the creativity of the community is really exciting, and being a part of that is just super fun. But Microsoft, open it up more, give us more capability, help us integrate more of the community-based things into what you guys are already doing. So anyways, that's my soapbox. I'll get off of that.
It's a good pitch.
So for someone budding who's never used an external tool before and they don't know where to start, they download BusinessOps because, again, I don't want to say unfortunately, but there is no real true repository of every external tool available. Um, BusinessOps is really the only platform that actually has a collection of external tools. If you didn't use that, you would basically do a bunch of Google searches and hope you came up with a list. You download BusinessOps, you add these external tools. And again, adding external tools is not going to break your computer either, even the ones that are like open a paginated report. We already talked about where do you start, but are there other side tools or other things that why I should be using external tools outside of Tabular Editor, outside of ALM Toolkit?
I mean, there's I think the hardest part about external tools is understanding what they all do. There's a couple of them that we've talked about today. So like split a PBIX file, very helpful tool, not very well known. Another tool that's very helpful is the hot swap connections. Super useful tool. I use it almost every day when I'm jumping between things in the service or things that are locally to do local dev or service dev. So and there's another one that's called DAX Beautifier by Davis Zhang, another really kind of interesting one. But like, you don't know what you don't know. You can't, like, how do you know what these tools all do? So, I mean, part of BusinessOps is trying to help expose all those to you and give you some other documentation. There should be links in there to all the different tools that we provide to you. So there's links to their repos, there's links to their help pages, there's links. So on the About page, we talk about all the contributors that give help to that. Read through that page. Go in there and look up every tool that you can see that you think might be interesting. And there will be like another page or a website page around additional documentation. Seth, you're going to say something? I kind of talked too much.
I completely agree, right? Like think of them as tools, though. They're not little quick things that you whip in, or
Yes.
don't need to spend some time in learning. Because for the ones that we've talked about, even they open up the capabilities typically on the back end, but there's a lot to them. You have to learn how to use them, whether or not they're going to be useful for your particular use case. And I think the BusinessOps does a great job of consolidating that, bringing that information to light. But yeah, people need to go and figure out which ones are going to be most useful for them. I think we've highlighted the ones that we think are, but there's a lot of other tools in there that people spend a lot of time solving a particular problem,
Yeah.
and are really, really useful to at least know about, because if you run into that particular issue, you would know that, hey, I think this external tool might solve that. I'll go invest more time into seeing if it would work out for me.
That's
But
actually,
love the
yeah.
fact that they added the capability, and the fact that we have these almost enterprise level tools within external tools is pretty amazing.
That's actually a good point, Seth. We really focus on the everyday, the essentials, so to speak, where you're going to probably use it every time. But there's a lot of those tools out there that are kind of for like one or two use cases that you may not use every day, but you may find it essential at different points. For example, I mentioned at the beginning the data flow one. A lot of people, if they create a data flow, they'll do it in desktop and then just copy the queries. Well, there's this one tool that will actually export the JSON model. So all you have to do is just import that into the Power BI service. That's a huge time saver.
Yes.
I think the Power BI side tools actually has a huge amount of features behind it.
I didn't get that one either. That was another one I was going to bring up. Another one is a really good Dieter out of France is made another one called Power BI Side Tools. Huge tool. Does a ton of little things all here and there.
Yeah.
Exporting things, connecting to models,
Connective VS Code.
Yeah, connective VS Code kind of stuff. He also has in there another one that he built called DAX Generator, which is a project that we've helped build, where you can actually parameterize your DAX statements and make common DAX statements that you can drag between different models. Even though your model column names are different, DAX Generator will allow you to pick columns from your data model and auto inject them into DAX code. And another gentleman on the phone, on the chat here, I'm trying to see the name here, has contributed massively to, Kevin Arnold. Kevin Arnold has been a huge contributor to a Git repo that we maintain. We've got well over 55, 60 measures now that people have created from the community, and you can just use them in any data model. They just go anywhere. So I've done a couple talks on this. That's like my 2022 talk here, is how amazing the DAX Generator tool is, because it saves me so much time. Super cool. Love it. Any other good stuff that we any other tools that we missed?
There's one that actually will connect to the paginated report, correct? A report builder.
I think so.
Believe so. So for those who are not yet or who are using paginated reports, I believe there is a direct connection that will open up report builder.
Yeah, and that's a
No, I have used it. Yeah.
well, I mean, you can right now. I mean, so today, right? If you go into the PowerBI.com service, actually, I just did a demo for a client recently, and I love actually this feature. Once you have a data model and you publish it to the service, there's now a right-click button on a data set that says Create Paginated Report, and you get a RDL file that automatically drops down to your desktop, pre-connected to the data model in the service, and it's so much easier. That some of the configuration pieces are just gone. You can just go in there. It has a little sample page for you. Right click, drop a table in, boom, connect to your data columns. Here's my measure, here's my dimension, ready to go. And it's making tables. Like, you can do a demo in like 2 minutes around making a paginated report off of an existing Power BI data model. It is super cool. So yeah, there's some.
I did not see that yet.
Oh man, I don't know if it just was recently released or what, but man, I really like that feature. And the client was ecstatic because they've got a whole ton of RDL files laying around. They're like, how do we get rid of our old RDL stuff? I'm like, this is how you do it.
I mentioned this in one of our previous podcasts. So
Yep.
I was astounded, even coming from the other direction where you have an old RDL file.
Yep.
And just report builder just sucks it up, change the connections, publish it. It's literally like a 10-minute exercise to take something that used to live in SharePoint or SSRS and publish it to Power BI.
Yep.
Just they did an amazing job of just solving that problem so efficient. Love the work that Chris and his teams have done, because if you think about where reports used to live, it was all paginated. It was all SSRS, and now you've simplified that stream to get it into Power BI to live right alongside all the other types of reporting, which we call Power BI reports, right? Amazing job.
Well, they made that easy.
It is fast. It is
from the second you said that ability to just now, I've already installed Report Builder and connected to a data set and paginated reports.
Oh man, you just got hit up, Seth. Mark wants a blog post.
Yeah.
Mark wants a blog post, please.
So, I guess the last thing I do want to see for being on kind of the cusp of the external tools, where do we want to see it go? Because obviously, I think there's still a very high ceiling. Like, where do we see it going, or where do you want it? Where do you think it should go?
Ooh, this is. I mean,
I think.
Go ahead.
Where do you want to take BusinessOps? Because, like, I mean, if we're talking about the main driver of external tools, it's probably BusinessOps, right? Like, Microsoft has the documentation of their 3 tools.
Yep.
I think we're privileged enough to have ours as that main grouping thing, but like, seriously,
here's DAX Studio, here's Tabular Editor, here's ALM Toolkit, here's everything else in BusinessOps.
I think directionally, it would be getting the word out that there's a tool that you can easily integrate with, which is ours. So you're in the mix, right? So people don't have to go searching for it, and then maybe it's refining how that tool surfaces up what problems these tools solve, Mike. I'm spitballing here on the moment, but ultimately, like, how do you the faster we can link people to issues that they're having that external tools could potentially solve, I think it extends it even further than Microsoft already had to, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think the funny thing, anecdotally, right, in introduction of BusinessOps was all of a sudden they had to expand how many icons could be used in a ribbon, because you could technically fill up the entire ribbon
and it's full.
The desktop.
Yeah.
And how does that work, right? So I think they were only thinking about the first 3, but what the community has already done, I think now is just how do you solve the volume problem, and maybe there's a search feature or something else that directs people to which external tool is going to solve something for them, right? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely like that one a lot. So here's what I would go to, right? So a lot of these external tools, today, if you're going to add them to your machine, require admin level privileges, because in order for them to add what they call the PBI tools external JSON file into Power BI Desktop, you have to put that file in a secure location. This is a super nitpicky thing from my standpoint. I would prefer if we could do external tools and install them on machines where we don't need to have admin privileges to install these tools. Right now, that's kind of what's happening, because you can't add that external tool into Power BI unless you have admin privileges. I get that. I understand it's a pain. But what I would also say is, because there are so many tools right now, one of the things where I think we're going with this, right? I don't want to have to continually install tools over and over and over again. I would like tools just to kind of auto update themselves in place. And, if I'm going to install an admin level tool to get all these external tools, I really do need a BusinessOps solution. So I can go to my IT group and say, I need to install this one tool called BusinessOps that gives me access to all the other tools. So, my feeling here is, I'm going to continue working with Microsoft as closely as I can to have BusinessOps be able to install itself without admin privileges for those who need it. And then when I need to provide admin privileges to go ahead and add these tools into Power BI, we have the ability of kind of like turning on the admin dial. And that way we only have a one-time effort to then install these tools. And then once they're installed, BusinessOps can manage all the updates for these things. And that way it always keeps things up to date for you. So there are some big revisions coming to BusinessOps that will then install it once, and it will auto update itself, and you can pick out which tools you want to update and not update. We're going to make it a bit more seamless for people to get into this space. But where does externals tools go? I don't know, right? Microsoft is adding more solid features to desktop. They call it hardening around what you can edit inside the data model. I think that's a big win. I think that's a huge win for us. Being able to create a table. You can't technically create a Power BI table today unless you use Dieter's DAX Generator side tool, because all the other tools are kind of blocking that because it's technically an unsupported feature. But I think the Microsoft hardening their desktop application to accept changes from third-party tools is a huge win, because that simplifies a lot of what other people can do. And now you can start scripting. And again, that's what DAX Generator does. I can script multiple DAX statements to be run at once. I can create a table. I can inject measures. I can do 6-7 things at one time. And I think when people are enabled to create automation around what they regularly do in desktop, that's going to make a big difference. And where I hope things go is where Microsoft opens up desktop enough where I can programmatically adjust the visuals on the page even. That would be even better. So I don't know if we'll ever get there. I'm thinking it's probably going to be a progression in time, right? Excel's been out for, I don't know what, 30 years, something like that, right? Excel day one wasn't having VBA, right? You couldn't do VBA inside Excel version 1. But here we are 30 years later, and now we have all these rich Excel tools, add-ins, and VBA, and custom code, and like you can now have a bit more pro dev inside the Excel space. I see the same thing happening for Power BI Desktop. It's just a matter of what Microsoft's priorities are, right? They have to cover the baseline of the visuals. They're so busy with coming out with new features for the service and the incredible goals that just came out. That's so everyone loves.
About, like the main focus of the 3 tools that they promoted, right? It unlocked the ability for us to go get into the back end of the tabular model. Right, from Power BI. We had it in Azure Analysis Services, right, where you had access to the whole back end. Now with Premium and these 3 tools, you've unlocked that area of Power BI from the enterprise perspective. And Mike, I think what you're outlining is great. Now unlock for us everything we had with Report Builder, all the properties of something, all the back end, so that we can configure and or modify these pieces of what we need to for the other half of what makes up the Power BI report.
Correct.
And the more control you have, the more fun stuff you can put together and automate.
Yes, 100% with that. Automation is key here, right?
Yeah.
We've built enough reports. I mean, people who are new to Power BI Desktop, probably okay clicking on a couple things and doing a little extra clicks and discovering where things are.
They got to learn, yeah.
But people who are seasoned, right? We know what features are there. We don't want to click all the buttons all the time, right? We just want it to go. Like, where's my natural language Q&A for the properties pane? That's what I need, Microsoft. Build me AI for the properties pane. I just want to talk to my computer. Turn off the axis. Turn on the y-axis. remove title, new title name, blah 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 blah, and just say it. That would be amazing. That would I would
take a
use
C script over
I would
that.
use that. Let me do that. I would use that more than
You wanna
DAX
talk to
generation.
Power BI?
What was that?
I'd
Yeah.
rather do a C
Yeah.
script.
I'm
than
gonna
try
go. I want to
say, "Turn
talk to
off
my
the
Power BI
X-axis."
through my microphone, and I wanted to change properties on my visuals when I talk to it. That would be huge.
I don't think that works with accents. Hey Siri, turn off the X-axis. Who asked you?
well,
You actually
you actually turned on Siri at that point. Love it. That's amazing.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Awesome. Hopefully everyone's devices are now going bananas now because everyone heard Tommy say it. Awesome. All right. Well, I think with that one, we've burned through a solid hour here together. This has been a great conversation. Thank you all for in the chat window. You've been like super lively. There's been a lot of comments here. Great things. So if you're following along on the YouTube video, thank you very much for watching. Our only ask for this is if you just share this with someone else. If you found some value here, if there's a couple external tools you did not hear or learn about or something new that you heard, share it on social media. Tell someone at work about it. Send an email to your boss and say, this is amazing. We should get these external tools in our environment. You should. I mean, realistically, this stuff will save you hours of time. I cannot stress it enough. And I think we're going to have to probably even do some more episodes on this in the future, talking about like all of the tools. We will need to do some homework on the tools that we've already collected and ones that we're finding out there to continually add more like, hey, did you guys know about this tool and this tool? There's probably a couple good topics around just finding extra stuff. Anyways, with that, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
So you can find the podcast anywhere it's available. If you're listening live right now, make sure to subscribe on Apple and Spotify or anywhere podcasts are available. Leave a rating. It really helps us out. If you're listening, join the conversation live Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7:30 a.m. Central. Follow Power BI Tips on YouTube and LinkedIn for the latest episodes that are going to come out.
And we've been getting a lot better with our links. The links are really the real links now. So I figured out what maybe the solution is. So we're going to keep rolling with it. So thank you all very much. We'll see you next week.